Is it better to buy or rent? What's good YouTube? It's your boy Nelson Nine Bills and welcome back to Adulting 101. On this channel, we talk about the process of going from a young adult to an adult, and that's investing, buying property, moving out, dealing with debt, credit scores, and everything else that they don't teach you about in school, but then you get hit with in real life as soon as you leave. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between buying versus renting. There is no definitive answer as to whether it's better to rent or buy. It simply depends on your circumstances, your goals, and what you want to do with yourself. However, in this video, I'll list out 3 benefits and 3 disadvantages of both, and you can make the decision yourself. I'm not a financial advisor, I'm just someone that makes YouTube videos, so make sure you do your own research before you commit to any spending and moving out. So I'll start off with renting. The main advantage with renting is flexibility. You can move out when you want. You just have to give maybe 1 month or 2 months notice depending on your tenancy agreement, and depending on what your lifestyle is like. If you want to move or you have kids or any kind of circumstantial changes, you can always downsize and upsize pretty quickly. That's like the main benefit of renting. Number 2 benefit, accountability. If something breaks, it's not really your responsibility to fix it. You can do, depending on what kind of tenant you are. But if the boiler breaks, you phone your landlord, yo, the boiler's broken. The hot water stops, you phone the landlord, yo, the hot water's not working, etc., etc. The accountability is always on the landlord, and you just have to pay your rent, and that's it. Number 3, in the UK, it's a renter's market, which means if you go to court or there's any kind of dispute between the tenant and the landlord, the tenant is more protected. I don't know why that is, but on gov.uk and when you look around on tenancy and tenant rights, they have much more protection from the government and from the law. So being a tenant is probably more beneficial than being a landlord in that sense. So to get a tenant out, it costs a lot of money. And even using the pandemic as an example, the whole government just put in a rule that you couldn't evict people if they lost their job due to COVID, and that put a lot of landlords out of pocket. Obviously a lot of people lost out, but particularly landlords who now don't have access to their property and also don't make any money from that property. So yeah, it's a bit of a killer.
It's a bit of a sticky one still.
But that's a benefit for you as a tenant, is that you go in there and hopefully you're not going to abuse the law, but you know that under the law you're protected. Your deposits in a safety scheme is in the right place and stuff, and a lot of things is not your problem. Just leave it with the landlord. So those are the benefits of renting. And you know what? A 4th one, why not? Is that it's quite cheap to rent depending on what you want to do. You could live. Prices are relative, isn't it? If you want to live in central London, you can find somewhere cheap, but it probably won't be a good living environment. Generally, when you're moving to a rented accommodation, you just need 1 month's rent, some references, and 1 month deposit, which in comparison to buying a property, sometimes you need 10, 20, 30, tens of thousands of pounds for a deposit and legal fees, etc., etc. So yeah, it's quite cheap. The disadvantages of renting, however, are, number 1, lack of control. So you have to remember, although this is your home, this is where you live, the landlord can decide, actually, next month, the rent's going up. Not really much you can do about it. The landlord could decide, I'm going to put a garage next to your house. He owns the land. He could basically just give you notice and then do that. For example, down in one of the properties I used to live at, the neighbours across the road, the landlord, they were renting, the landlord just decided to erect a new whole property next to them, and they had garden space on that side. So they basically just told them, listen, over the next few months we're going to build a house here, you're going to have no garden anymore, your space is going to be different and there's going to be a new house there. What can you do? So accept it. You can move out or you can just take it. So lack of control is one thing. I think on top of that, you can't really change things in the house. You can probably paint the walls and stuff, but I really doubt you'd be allowed to knock walls down and change things exactly as you like, which obviously if you buy a property, then you could do that. The number two disadvantage of renting is your money gets thrown away essentially. Like, the money doesn't go to anything. When you're paying a mortgage, you're paying down the balance of the mortgage, like less interest, but at least eventually you get your money back. If you sell or if you remortgage, that's going to equity. But with renting, after you pay, you're just paying for the space, and then that's it. It's just gone. So that's like probably the number one disadvantage that people think of when you say renting versus buying. On top of that, if you're living in a comfortable space, a lot of the time your comfortability and your environment sort of links to the price. So if you're in a comfortable place and you want to live somewhere nice, you're going to be paying that amount per month. So if you do eventually want to buy a place, you're going to have to give up that standard to save money. Yes, it can be difficult to save it whilst paying rent. And number three, it's restricted. So the lack of control sort of links with this, but it's restricted. You could live in a property that the landlord decides no pets, no smoking, and you have to abide by those rules as part of your tenancy agreement. As long as you sign it, that's what you're bound by. So it can be restrictive living in rented accommodation. Buying a property or owning. The number one benefit of buying a property is equity. You pay the monthly mortgage payments, you put down a deposit, you pay, everything. But a large proportion of that you can get back, either through refinancing or like getting a new mortgage to consolidate and pay off your old one and you keep what the difference is, or by selling and you get the capital gains, which is like the property appreciation. You get all the money there, and also you get all your payments that you've paid, your mortgage payments minus interest and whatever fees, and your deposit back. So the money is not wasted. That's like the main benefit. Another benefit is obviously linking to one of the disbenefits of renting, which is you have the freedom to do whatever you want basically. That comes with a caveat's a work word, but like comes with like terms and conditions essentially. If you're in a flat, you're technically a leaseholder, so the freehold or the building that the flat is on is owned by someone else, and there will be some restrictions on what you can and can't do within the house, i.e. knocking down walls, yada yada yada. So in a house, if you're buying a house, then you're free to do what you want under permitted development. So like you don't have to apply for planning permission to change anything. A lot of the things you could just do yourself in the house. So you have that freedom. Those are the two benefits. I don't think there are like many other benefits than that. Disbenefits or disadvantages, however, number one is exposure. Over time, property prices do go up. There should be some graph on the screen with property prices in the UK going up, with the little thing in 2008 where the property prices went down with the financial crash. But at the same time, that's an important thing, is that when you own the property, you're exposed to price fluctuations and the market changing. So as the market goes up, yes, it's great, you can get the capital appreciation that I mentioned, but if there is a crash or something happens where your property value goes down, you could be paying negative equity, which is you're paying a loan, your mortgage, you're paying a loan for something that's not worth what you've loaned the money on, and that's all on you. Like, if you sell your house, you're still going to owe the bank money. So you make yourself exposed to that. Another disadvantage, number two disadvantage of buying a property is it's not as flexible. So if your circumstances change and you want to move somewhere else, you'd probably have to sell. Selling is, it's not as straightforward. Sometimes the process can take months. Using an estate agent, find a solicitor, doing all this other stuff is quite long. You can rent it out. However, being a landlord is a profession. So a lot of the time you get accidental landlords, and then you find out actually tenants have more rights than you thought. It's going to be difficult to evict someone. I know some people are thinking, well, you could just rent it out. You can rent it out. However, being a landlord is a profession in itself. And a lot of the time, the people who are moving aren't thinking about how they're going to deal with tenants and how they're going to deal with broken things and electricity and plumbing and boilers and all that kind of stuff. That's not what they're trying to do. They're just trying to move from where they live to somewhere else. And what happens a lot of the time is when you can't sell or you want to rent and do something quickly, you end up becoming an accidental landlord, which is someone who doesn't really know what they're doing as a landlord, but you just own another property. And that's not an advantageous position to put yourself in. Also on exposure, you're exposed to interest rates. At the moment, the Bank of England interest rate is really low, and that is how banks use the base rate to charge interest. So like interest rates on loans right now are really low. However, in a different economy, interest rate could be high, and that will affect your mortgage payment. So your mortgage payment can go from 2% to 6%, and that's like 3 times what you're paying. So you're exposed to that as well. Whereas when you're renting, you just know I'm paying this per month, although they could hike it up, but it's not as straightforward. And obviously number 3, the biggest disadvantage to buying a property is the deposit and upfront fees. According to Halifax in 2020, the average house price was £460,000. If you're using the Help to Buy scheme in London, you're going to put down a 5% or 10% deposit, which is between £13,000 and £26,000, which is a lot of money for a lot of people. So that plus the furnishing, plus the solicitors, plus mortgage brokers, and all the fees, which I mentioned in a previous video, if you want to check that out, the hidden cost of buying a property is quite expensive. So that's like the number 3, I guess, in this video. But most spoke about disadvantage of buying a property. It's important to note that when I'm thinking about these buying versus renting, I'm looking at it over a defined period. So over 5 years, which is a good time to plan your life. So if you can plan for the next 5 years, the first year, second year, third year, really clear, defined goals, specific. And then as you go further past 5 years, like there's more and more variables come in. People can die, you can have children, lots of things can happen.
Tough time never lasts. Only tough people last.
Obviously, by God's grace, we don't have bad things, but they do happen. So over 5 years, you can compare renting versus buying. Over the longer term, for like your lifetime, I think, like I said, I'm not a personal advisor or financial advisor, but I think you should buy a property, pay off your mortgage, whatever, because when it's time to retire and you're old and you can't work anymore, some people are going to say, yeah, I'm a businessman and this and that, but not everyone's entrepreneurial like that. Some people will work their whole life, retire, and then, live off their pension. Now, if you're renting, over time, the rent prices have increased as well. So you're going to be spending all your pension on rent, which will leave you nothing to live with. So over your lifetime, I would say at some point you should try and buy a property, so you can just live with like minimal fees. You just pay your electric and then just go on cruises and whatnot until for the rest of your life. So over the long run, I'd say definitely buy a property. So for those people who are renting, or those people who haven't bought yet, or plan to, the government has government encouragement. So there are no, as far as I know, there are no schemes that encourage you to rent. There are, however, schemes that encourage first-time buyers to buy properties. This comes with a grey area, because the government is making money off of first-time buyers as well. Like when they give you the equity loan or whatever they give you, when you sell the property or pay it back to them, they keep the percentage. So it's like, if I give you 10%, I want 10% back. So if the property is £100,000 now and I give you 10%, when you sell it for £200,000, I'm taking 10%. So I've made 10 grand too. So yeah, the government's making money off of you guys, off of us. However, that's still an advantage of buying property, because you can get a fairly large amount. I say fairly, you can get a large amount of money for nothing, basically. Well, interest-free for 5 years initially. And also there's the Help to Buy, not Help to Buy. There is the Help to Buy ISA, but you can't open one now. Check out my previous video. I speak about Help to Buy ISAs if you want to know about it. No point, but you can do. The Lifetime ISA gives you 25% on whatever you save, up to £1,000 per year. So you can only get that bonus if you're going to buy a property. So even if you're renting or you're living at home or you haven't bought yet, open a Lifetime ISA. I'll leave a link down below. You can open one and get 25% bonus on your money saved. And yeah, that's an advantage of buying property rather than renting.